Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a long time since I posted on here, and that is kind of obvious probably from the title for why. We've just been going through quite a bit in the last few months, so I just wanted to come back on here and kind of explain everything and talk about my experience with miscarriage and coping. I did want to say first though that if you are currently pregnant, I probably would recommend to not watch this video. You just don't want to instill like any sort of fear or anxiety into you. And I just pray that you are blessed with a healthy baby and that God will get you through your pregnancy without fear or anxiety. But I just wanted to say that real quick because I know that for me, when I was pregnant, I just tried to stay away from videos like this because I didn't want to induce any sort of negativity into the pregnancy as far as fear or that kind of thing goes. So this video is mainly for people who are going through any sort of loss. You know, it doesn't have to be miscarriage specifically. That's just my experience at this point. But just any sort of loss or grief and kind of how to cope with that and what that means as far as our faith and our belief in God and all of that. So let's just get into the video. So back in February, I found out that I was pregnant, and it wasn't something that my husband and I were really expecting. We weren't trying, but we also have always been open to life since we got married last May. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary of marriage. So throughout this whole year, we've always known that it could be a possibility, but it wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to stress out about because I know that that's really not healthy, and it's I just wanted it to be in God's timing. So we just kind of were always open, and we ended up getting pregnant and finding out in February. So we were just overjoyed, and you know, all the emotions, just kind of nervous and anxious, and we knew it was God's timing, obviously, like I had said, but we didn't know like what changes that was going to bring because obviously this is our first child. And there was just so many emotions, but overall I was just so excited to be a mom because that's really been my dream my whole life. I've always said that I just want, you know, to be married and have babies. That's just always been my goal in life. So yeah, we were just super excited. I ended up telling him the same day that I found out. I couldn't keep it in, so I told him right away. And then we told our family, like our immediate families, within the week, I would say, of finding out. And we found out when I was around 6 weeks. So yeah, so we were able to at least tell our close immediate family, but I knew I didn't want to tell any of my friends or any of my extended family until I was further along. Miscarriage was something that I definitely had been fearful of, especially early on. My mom had 4 miscarriages, so it's definitely something that I was aware of and I knew could potentially happen. So, you know, from week, I would say around when I first found out at 6 weeks to about 8 or 9 weeks, I had that sort of anxiety throughout the pregnancy. And then I started to kind of change my feelings towards that and just be grateful because I knew that even if I wasn't meant to carry this baby to term, that I was just thankful for the time that I had with this little one. So yeah, so I had peace throughout that time then. And then obviously as you keep getting closer to your due date, you kind of get more confident over time with thinking that everything's going well. Once you get past the first trimester, it really, usually you feel like you're more in the safe zone. Not that there really ever is a safe zone, unfortunately, but you just feel more confident, I guess. So after about 12 to 13 weeks, I really wasn't thinking about miscarriage at all. I just felt like, you know, everything was going great with the pregnancy. The baby was healthy. We didn't know what we were having as far as gender But yeah, we just, the heartbeat was good and my blood pressure, all of that kind of things that they check at every appointment, everything was going great. So there was really no reason for us to be concerned, I guess, at that point. And we were just really excited. We ended up telling my friends and close, like extended family around week 12. And then we ended up telling pretty much everybody around week 15. So that's when I really felt more confident in telling everybody. We posted a little post on Facebook on Mother's Day. So it was really sweet that everybody was just really excited for us. And it was just a really wonderful time to just enjoy being pregnant and looking forward to what the summer was going to hold, and just expecting our little baby in the fall. So throughout that time, I had planned to make a video about my first trimester experience, and I actually did, like, ironically, I guess you could say, I did make a video the day that I found out that we had lost the baby. So that was really hard. And I won't be posting that video for obvious reasons, but my first trimester was definitely difficult. There was some, quite a bit of morning sickness and, the typical symptoms that go along with pregnancy. So yeah, there was times where it was just hard, and I knew that like was going to be the case, but it made me feel guilty in a way because I wanted to just enjoy everything. And there was times where I just really felt tired and worn out, and not that I would ever, I was just so excited to be a mom and I just wanted that little baby so bad. But pregnancy is hard and it really wears you down. And I only experienced really the first trimester and in half of the second trimester. But yeah, overall it was, just a really beautiful time to just be with my baby, and I loved it. And as much as there were hard times, I definitely appreciated the fact that I was able to grow a life inside of me, and I just knew how precious they were, not knowing the gender at that point. So fast forward to about 2 weeks ago, actually, is when we found out that I went in for just a regular appointment, and my midwife had tried to check the heartbeat, and at first she wasn't hearing anything. So I was a little nervous, obviously, because you just never know. And then she scanned my uterus with a little handheld ultrasound machine that she has. And I could tell that something was wrong. And I remember trying not to really worry because I knew that there were things that could be causing this. Different things I had heard, like a retroverted uterus, or maybe your placenta was anterior. At this point, I was 17 weeks, almost 18 weeks. So I really I was trying not to worry, I guess, because I knew that, like, being that far along, the chances of miscarriage are pretty low. But at the same time, I obviously was nervous, and I remember texting my husband and just told him to pray because I just didn't know what to expect. And I told him that it could be nothing, but just in case, I just wanted him to pray so that we could try to get peace throughout that time. So she ended up having me wait in the waiting room that I was in to get an actual, like, ultrasound with a professional sonographer. I ended up waiting almost 2 hours for this ultrasound, and throughout that time I was trying to pray and trying to distract myself, but there's really only so much you can do in a circumstance like that where your brain is just kind of going all over the place. And I was trying really hard not to spiral or start crying or any of those things until I knew. So then I went in for my ultrasound finally, and they started checking everything, and they weren't, the ultrasound tech, I think, is required that she can't say anything at that point. But she was measuring different parts of my baby, and then eventually my midwife came in and asked her to verify whether or not there was a heartbeat. And this, at that point, they said that there was no heartbeat, which was really hard for me to hear because I was alone, and it just felt like a dream, like it just felt like something that couldn't possibly be real, but it was. And and I just felt really alone in that point in my life, or in that situation, because I didn't have my husband, I didn't have anybody with me, because you just don't expect it. I had no symptoms of miscarriage at all. So, which I'll kind of get into in a little bit, but yeah, so I ended up, realizing that this was reality, and they kind of told me what the next steps were as far as where I would go from here, and how we had, that the baby probably wasn't going to come out on their own. So I would need to be induced or have a D&C, which, if you don't know what that is, it's kind of a procedure where they go in and remove the baby. So that night I ended up telling my husband that we lost our baby, and it was just really a shock for both of us. I don't really remember that night very well. I know that my parents came over and we talked for a while, but when you're in kind of that dream state of, is this reality? It's really hard for your brain to process everything, and you kind of start to, I don't know, it's just something that you're not, you start to forget things, once the time has passed and you've had time to process, you don't really remember every detail, I guess. So I know that whole weekend was kind of a whirlwind of emotion. And anyways, we went in for an appointment the following day to kind of figure out what our options were and where we were going to go from there. So we ultimately decided that I was going to be induced. And so I was induced on Friday, May 31st. And what they did basically is they started my labor with a medication. You can't get Pitocin when you're that early on, when you're, I don't know if it's before 22 weeks. I forget what the actual number is, but basically they had to start my labor with medication, and it came on really fast, the contractions and everything. It was pretty painful that whole day. So they started my labor that morning of Friday the 31st, May 31st, and 12 hours later, around like 6:50 or something like that, I ended up having her. And we didn't know what the gender was, but we did find out that we ended up having a little girl, and we named her Evelyn May. So it was a really beautiful time that we got to spend with her in the hospital. We were there until about 11:30 at night, and we just tried to soak in everything that, every bit of time that we could with her, knowing that that's kind of why I wanted to go through the induction process. When you do a D&C, you're not able to have that time with your baby physically. So I knew it was going to be really, really hard to see her because she was so small and underdeveloped, obviously being a 17-week-old baby. But I also knew that this would help me process the grief in a way that was just more real and tangible, being able to physically hold her and see her. So yeah, that time was really hard for both of us. Hi. But yeah, so those hours were the hardest hours of my life. I said that that day in general was just the hardest day of my life, but also I could see God's hand working through it all. So, so I kind of want to get into some of that stuff in a little bit. It was a silent miscarriage, so that just means that my body did not show any signs. Typically when you're about to miscarry, you show signs of bleeding or spotting or intense cramping, things like that. I had no signs. All of my pregnancy symptoms were the same that they had been. And I don't really know what's worse. I think both are just so hard, and any phase of, no matter how far along you are in your pregnancy or loss, like I said, of any kind, is just awful and not what you expect or what you'd ever want in life. I know people that knew that their baby wasn't going to make it, and they just had to kind of wait until that process took place, and I just can't imagine that either. So as much of this was such a shock to both of us because there were no symptoms, it was almost I don't know, it's just something that, like I said, there's really no good way to experience this. So when you're experiencing grief, it's hard not to be angry with God and want to know why you have to experience it, or all these questions come into your brain of like, just, kind of test your faith in a way. And there's definitely a reality to that. And I know that when I was in the hospital holding my little girl, I just felt all sort of emotion, all the stages of grief all at once. I felt like, where it's just like, you just, I'd look over to my husband holding her, and it just felt like just so right to see him holding a baby, and then having to remember, like, we don't get to take that baby home. And then seeing, just feeling so much anger towards the situation, and not knowing how to process that, and so much love, and just all the emotions that go into it. But what I wanted to say is that there's always beauty from ashes. There's always something that we can take away when you're going through an experience like this, and to know that God is with you through it. So that's why I wanted to kind of talk about this little story about how she got her name. So my mom was there with me throughout that day, along with my husband, and my dad actually too came later on in the day, but both of them were with me like throughout the entire process, my mom and my husband. And my mom was in the waiting room talking to her sister on the phone, just kind of discussing different things about what's going on. And then when she got off the phone, she was just looking out the window and just had tears coming down her cheeks. And she heard a little voice behind her that said, everything's going to be okay. And she was really taken aback because she didn't expect anybody to be there. She didn't know anybody was in the room. And she looked behind her, and like it was a little boy that said that his mom was going through the same experience, and that, that's going to be okay. And my mom talked to him for a little bit and just felt like it was such a sweet thing for him to try to comfort her and to comfort her, because you just don't expect that from somebody that's so young. So she thought that was really amazing, and she ended up telling me about that little boy. And then about an hour later, we got a knock on our door, and my nurse delivered a balloon and a little card that said, "God is close to the brokenhearted." And it ended up being from that little boy. So we were just shocked because we didn't expect somebody to do something like that for us, and it was just so kind. And so I asked my mom to find out to first thank him and ask what his name was, and his age and everything. And just for his privacy and his family's privacy, I don't want to get into his name or anything like that, but he was 13, so very young to be so kind to think of another person going through this. He went down to the gift shop all by himself, got his balloon and card and everything for us. So it was just such a sweet gesture, and it's something I'll remember the rest of my life. But we ended up naming our baby Evelyn based on kind of his name and after him, because we didn't have a name for the baby at that point. So yeah, we named her Evelyn, and then May because it was May 31st. And when I looked up those name meanings, Evelyn means desired life and May means wish for child. So when we found that out, it just felt like such a God moment. Like it was just so evident that everything was working together in the way that it should. And she was meant to be an Evelyn all along. And as hard as it is to accept that she couldn't be here with us, you can see God's hand in it. And I just know that for whatever reason, her life wasn't meant to go on, and she was meant to go back to heaven and to be with Jesus. And it's very comforting for me, and I hope for other women or families going through this, to think that their child has only experienced love in their life, because they didn't have to grow and be in this world and experience suffering and pain and everything. They just got to go right back to heaven, and now they are with Jesus and Mary, and they get to be safe there until we get to see them again. So that's a really comforting thought. But yeah, so we ended up finding out that there were 2 other families going through the exact same thing that we were going through that day, which was, it's something that I would never wish on somebody else, ever. But it was comforting to know that we weren't the only ones going through that in the hospital. And I've actually been keeping in touch with that little boy's mom now, which has been really nice to kind of talk to somebody who's going through the same thing that you are. So that was a huge blessing from God. And I know that just shows that he's there with me. And that's given me a lot of comfort throughout this whole process. So for any woman going through this, I just want to say that my heart goes out to you. Really, until you do go through it, it's hard to kind of know what it would feel like, just like any sort of loss. It's hard to know, but it's just, there's so many emotions that go into it. At least for me, it's like, this is our first one. So it's the fear that we won't ever be able to experience a family, and like I said, the anger feeling, and there's a rejection feeling from God, thinking like, why do others get to experience this and why am I going through this? And then there's guilt, thinking like, why was my body not good enough? Why couldn't I protect my baby? Why, did I do something that could have possibly caused this? And all of those feelings are definitely valid, and I think they're real emotions that people experience, because the last couple weeks have just been a whirlwind of emotion and kind of all of these wounds that have come to the surface in my heart of just fears, anxieties, self-hatred, guilt, shame, like I said, all of these horrible things that, when you already are trying to process the loss of somebody that you loved, and then you have all of these things coming at you of spiritual warfare is what it really is. So I kind of wanted to talk about that, because I just hope that if you are going through that, just know that you're not alone in those feelings. It's very common to feel that way when you're going through something like this, and it's hard to not believe it, even though people can tell you over and over again, this is nothing that you did. It's hard to really believe that or want to believe it, at least in my case. So for that, I just really recommend seeking help in some way, just talking to somebody. Don't live in it by yourself. Miscarriage can be something that is really, it's a silent grief for a lot of people. It wasn't for me, and I really, it was kind of against what I would have wanted, because like I said, we had made it public because we were so far along, thinking it's okay to make it public at this point. But it's been really healing to have all these people come forward and say that they're praying for us. And the support from my family and friends has been huge. Just tons of, people sending us gifts or care packages or whatever it is. Just, we have a lot of love surrounding us, and I know we're so blessed by that, because not everybody has a ton of support. And I think, if this is you and maybe you are going through a miscarriage that was earlier on, so there's a lot of people that didn't know that you're going through it, or if you don't have the support that you need, there are so many programs or people to reach out to that want to help, and just find somebody to talk to, specifically somebody that's been through it, because that's really helpful. Like I said, it's just hard to know how you're gonna feel with all of those layers of emotion unless you've really gone through it. Like, it is a loss, but then there's those deeper feelings of why couldn't I have carried them, or what did I do wrong? All of those kind of feelings are normal and natural, and you just have to talk to somebody, because you can't try to deal with that on your own. So I just wanted to say that. For me, I just went to a counseling session yesterday, actually, which was really healing, because prior to that, I had a lot of anxiety, just where you just feel like your chest is tight. If you've ever experienced that, you kind of know what I'm talking about. But for me, I get anxiety mainly in the mornings when I first wake up, knowing that I have to face the whole day, and you just feel like you can't breathe in a way. Like, you just can't imagine going through a whole day again. And once you get up and start moving and getting ready for the day, it starts to get better, for me at least. But that initial waking up time is like suffocating. So I experienced that quite a bit throughout the last couple weeks. And going to this session, counseling session, this morning was the first morning that I woke up and really didn't feel so much of it. I started to kind of creep in, and I just felt like my defense mechanisms were so much stronger, because I was able to kind of find my strength in that, and to let go of whatever was oppressing me at the time. For me, I really believe in spiritual warfare and all of that kind of thing. So that was something that I definitely experienced, and now I have a better handle on it. And it doesn't make it go away fully, but it does help to be able to talk and get your feelings and emotions out there, so that you don't have to carry that with you as an extra burden on top of the just natural process of grief that is inevitable. And then the last thing that I wanted to get into is how to cope with something like this. If you've never gone through grief before, it's really hard to try to figure out how you're going to move on, or what's going to help you. So I just wanted to give some examples of things that help me when I am going through something. And this is obviously the biggest thing that I've had to go, well, maybe not obviously, but it is the biggest thing that I've had to go through in my life. I don't wish this on anybody. Losing a child is something that you just don't expect. Like I said, especially when you're far along in your pregnancy, or no matter, how old that child is, or whatever stage you are in mothering, it's hard to experience that. And it's something that is probably going to be a lifelong grief. I know for me, like there's something that there will be times that I experience joy. Even now, even in the last couple weeks, I've experienced joy, and it's a really refreshing feeling. But then all of a sudden the feelings of sadness and everything just come back, and I expect that. It's not something that I really I wouldn't think it would go away at this point because it's just too early. But basically, if you think of grief as like, what I've heard is, just think of a big square box as your grief, and then there's a circle in the square, and every time that circle kind of hits against the wall of the square, the pain just comes back to you and you feel all those emotions again. And then over time, the circle just keeps getting smaller and smaller so that it'll still hit that wall, but it doesn't hit as often. As they say, time heals, and that might be true, but I don't expect this to ever go away. I know that forever I'll be thinking of, what age she would have been, and who she could have become, and all of those things. She's a part of our family now forever, no matter how many kids we have. I want our kids to know who she is and who she was, and to be able to pray to her, because she's our little saint in heaven watching over us. And I know she's given us a lot of strength already, which is really helpful too, to honor that baby and to know that they are in heaven watching over you. And that is such a gift in itself. And just to hold on to that hope that you will be able to see them again someday. But yeah, so for me, how I cope is I watch other people's stories. That's something that I really have got a lot of comfort in these last couple weeks. And kind of one of the reasons I wanted to make this video is I noticed that there's not a lot of stories or experiences of miscarriage here on YouTube, and especially not during the second trimester, or thankfully there's not a lot of people that have experienced this, and maybe they do, but they just are more quiet about it or whatever it is. But I just wanted to make a video because I know for me it helps so much to see that other people experience stuff like this and that they're able to overcome it, and God willing, that they are able to have more babies, or that they can find joy again in their life. So that's really comforting. Another thing that I do is I go for walks a lot. Definitely a good source of stress relief for me is to go for hikes and just be in nature and just be quiet and present and feeling God's grace around me. Music has been huge. I listen to all sorts of Christian music, classical music, things that are just very calming and help me to feel at peace, because that's really what you crave so much in a time of like this, is just peace. You don't want these waves of, there's already so much going on in your head, and waves of grief that come and go, but it's helpful to try to get that peace from music or reading your Bible or prayer or whatever it is. So those are just some of the things that I do to try and help me cope with it. And then obviously leaning on other people, like I said, trying to find a counselor, somebody that's been through it before, talking to your family, talking to your husband. That's a whole nother thing, is your husband probably is experiencing the pain in a different way from you. I know for my husband, it's been really difficult, trying to process the loss of what our child was. He didn't get to carry her in the same way that I did, so it's harder for him to kind of connect it, I think, in that way. But it is very, very hard on him, and it's hard on him to see me go through this, and just really lean in on your support system. because that is something that is so important throughout this time. It's hard for me to accept help or, gifts or whatever it is from people, but I know that people just want to help and they feel better, doing something for us. And we appreciate that so much, whether it be like flowers, like I said, or a meal or some sort of remembrance, something like that is just, we just really appreciate all of that. And not that we expect it or anything, but I know that people just want to help, and it does help. It makes you just feel loved, which is important during something like this. Okay, so then lastly, this video is pretty long, but I just wanted to end with some of my favorite verses that have really helped comfort me in this time, and then also different songs that I've listened to quite a bit, because usually when I'm going through something, I find some song that helps me kind of through it, and I just listen to it on repeat. And then if you hear it years later down the road, it kind of connects you back to that time. So I guess I'll get into those songs first. So the first one is To Know Me by Lauren Daigle. I really love her music. If you don't know who she is, I recommend looking her up. She's a Christian artist, and she has been so healing to me throughout many periods of my life, but that's been my number one song right now, is To Know Me. So I recommend that one. There is a hymn called In the Garden, and different people sing it. I know Alan Jackson sings it, and different country artists, or lots of people. So we really love that hymn. My husband and I have sang that quite a bit lately. And then the last song that I listened to, I actually don't know who it's by, but it's called Joy Comes in the Morning. So if you look that up on YouTube, that's a really great song to kind of just give you hope and just lift your spirits a little bit. So yeah, and then lastly, I just wanted to get into some of the verses that have comforted me throughout this time. So the first one is pretty common. It's actually my favorite verse in the Bible, but I just go back to it over and over again when I'm going through something, because the devil wants nothing more than to instill fear into you, and to know that God has a plan for you is so comforting, because when you're going through something like this, you just feel like it's the end of your life and that there's no way out of it, and that's just not true. So it's Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will restore your fortunes and gather you from all the nations and all the places where I have driven you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which I have deported you. So I really love that one, and it gives just a lot of hope, and that's what it's meant to do. So the next one is actually part of my little series here that I do verse by verse. I haven't done that in a while because I just haven't been on YouTube for a while, but it's from the book of James. So it's James chapter 1, verse 2. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So that gives me comfort, because I know that when it feels like everybody's going just through their life, and that they aren't experiencing anything, and you feel kind of alone in that, and just to know that if you live long enough, everybody will experience a trial of some kind, and it really is kind of a testing of your faith. If you read the book of Job, that's something my husband and I are are reading again now throughout this, but when you read the book of Job, everything was taken from him, and yet he still chose to praise the Lord. And I already said that that's something that, you know, I haven't been able to be perfect at, because there's so many times where you just feel so angry and hurt and alone, and you just want to blame God. But which is, it's an okay feeling to have, but to know that you have to move past that. You can't stay in that forever. You can't reject God, because God is love, and anything beyond that is darkness, and it's a much scarier place to be. So you have to just pull yourself together and know that each person goes through a trial, and it really just strengthens your faith overall. So I'm trying to remember that the testing of our faith produces steadfastness, and like I said earlier, that God can create beauty from these ashes, and that there is hope. So that's been really helpful in all of this as well. And then the last one is actually just a verse that I didn't really know ever, but it just started coming to my head. So to me, that was kind of just a sign that God's comforting me in all this. So it's Psalm 23, and I've heard it before. I shouldn't say I don't know it, but it's not something that I ever meditated on. It's not a verse that I really have. Maybe I've heard it subconsciously, but I don't know that I've actually sat in my Bible and read it. But yeah, so it's, the Lord is my shepherd, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So that has been a very big source of comfort for me as well. That one part, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. That's come to my head over and over again the last couple weeks, and it's been helpful. But yeah, so I just want to end on those verses and just say that if you're experiencing this, just know that it will be okay. You'll get through it, and it just takes time to grieve something like this. It is a real loss. Don't let anybody make you feel like it's not, because it's something that is real, and it's a life, and it should be protected, and it should be something that, it should not be something that is just forgotten and just try to pretend like it doesn't matter as much as it does. So, but yeah, so thank you for watching this video. I wasn't expecting to have such a heavy video on my channel. I guess this early on into YouTube, I really wasn't. But if you could please pray for me and my family, we would really appreciate it. And I'll be praying for anybody that's experiencing this or any loss of any kind. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in a future video. Bye.